of the circle of life. Get out of the folder. The circle of life that we're all in. The cycle. And it is an ongoing series of openings and closings, of beginnings and endings, of hellos and goodbyes, and even, yes, life and death. I mean, this is the cycle of life that we're in, and that's what we're talking about. And as I stressed each week, there is something very important to know about this cycle, not a circle, it's a circle cycle of life, and that it is not stagnant. It does not loop back onto itself, as I've been saying every week. It's the circle, but it's always expanding and growing, the ever-growing, ever-expanding circle of life. So it's not a stagnant thing. It's moving, it's growing. And like we are, since we're all microcosms of this one infinite source of good. But I'm going to quote Ernest Holmes. He talks about the spiral of life, and he says the spiral of life is upward, eternal and progressive expansion in its law, and there are no breaks in its continuity. So each Sunday, inspired by the play movie The Lion King, that's what we're basing this on, we're exploring this upward spiral of life itself. We did see the movie on Monday, last Monday, and it was a good movie and it makes perfect sense. Specifically today, though, we're going to look at the downward arc of the circle, because it is a circle there, and it's, you know, even in the circle there are ups and downs, but in the circle, in the downward arc of the circle, the places that feel like goodbyes, closings, the places that feel like endings or death, these places can be dark and scary. And Carol's reading was so perfect. When we are in these places, we feel as if we have lost our way, or this portion of the circle will last forever. Sometimes when you're in that downward arc of the circle, it feels like it's never going to be over. Like, when is this going to end? But, as we know, it always passes. We're going to get into that today. So, our hero, Simba in The Lion King, I hope you've all seen it. If not, you should have been here on Monday. We saw it. But Simba, he certainly found himself. But because of some tragic events in his life, he left and forgot who he was. He forgot the truth of his being and his place in the cycle and circle of life. So he wandered for a long time, not fulfilling his life's purpose. Eventually, the shamanic figure, Rafiki, came to him to help him remember who he was and who he is, and second of all, where his rightful place is. During this time of wandering, during his dark night of the soul, Simba's deceased father, Musaka, came to him. Mufasa is the food, okay. Mufasa, I love Musaka. Yeah, I know. Okay, Mufasa, his father, came to him and gave him some very, very wise and infinitely intelligent advice. In a vision, he came to him, and he said, and now this is James Earl Jones is in the movie, so you know his gorgeous voice. But he says, "Simba, have you forgotten who you are? You are more than you have become. You must take your place in the circle of life." But in that nice James Earl Jones voice. And of course, we've all explored in the past few weeks what it means to take our place in this circle of life, because we all have an individualized, perfect place in life, each and every one of us. Sometimes we forget. We get lost and we forget, and we stay stuck in that darkness. So the idea that you are more than you have become, you must take your place in the circle of life, is going to be our mantra. We're going to individualize that. But when we're in this downward arc of the circle, and we're all there sometimes, it's not all bright lights and great times. Sometimes this stuff's going on and it doesn't feel good. Dark night of the soul, or just problems that haven't seen the light yet. But we're going to make it personal here by saying, I am more than where I am right now. I can take my place in the circle of life. And I want you to repeat that after me. I'll say it again. I am more than I am right now.
I am more than I am right now.
I can take my place
I can take my place
in the circle of life.
in the circle of life.
Don't you want to be in that great circle and not like in that illusion of disconnect? Because it is an illusion, it's not the truth. So this morning, my desire to assist you is getting a new perspective of this downward arc that we can sometimes find ourselves on. So there are two points here. The first one is by finding the blessing it has to offer. Okay? Because everything has a blessing, whether you like it or not. But you will like it. And two, by realizing that it did not come to stay. This is so important. In fact, it came to pass. Okay, these situations and looking like problems in our life, because that's what they feel like, are not here to stay. They pass. They pass. So let's talk about finding the blessings. I know I'm lots of times often talking about finding the good in every situation. And, you know, people can say, well, there it goes again. There she goes again, finding the good. I don't see any good here. But I want to give you two thoughts on this finding the good. Because I'm telling you, if you stay open and receptive, there is good in every single situation and experience that you find yourself in. It just doesn't feel like that when you're going through it. But if you stay centered and you look for the good, you will definitely find it, and it will be a blessing. It's always a blessing. So, first, following the true light. Two thoughts about finding the blessings, okay? So, several years ago, I read this from the Science of Mind magazine, which is a great little magazine, and it contained a wonderful metaphor for what we are speaking about today. And so the author of this article, as it's explaining what state she was in when she wrote it, had a window next to her computer. So she's looking out the window, and she had a skylight, and she saw that there was a hummingbird flying around, and it couldn't get out. It was stuck, because it kept flying towards the light, but the light had glass on it. It was the skylight, right? So she had a brilliant idea that she would cover up the skylight. And if she covered up this source of false light, because it's not the true light, then the hummingbird would find his way out of this false light and fly into the true light, the real light, the only source of good there is. And as she climbed up the ladder and covered up that, as soon as she got to the bottom, that bird had found its way out into the true light, the sunlight, the God light, if you will. So she wrote this. This incident caused me to ask myself, what happens in my life when I have been following a false light? And I realized that some kind of dark night of the soul often occurred. In that moment, she writes, I gave thanks for my dark night of the soul because it is an indication for me to take another path, to the light. I then follow the truth of being well connected to Spirit, to God, because God is my light, she writes, and my connection with this truth cannot be broken. It cannot be broken. We might think it is. We might feel the disconnect. But in true reality, we are all one. We really are. But because we see through our eyes, everyone has a form and looks separate. But within each form is that essence of light. In fact, the form is inside of the essence of light. That is the oneness of divinity, of the divine. So, being on this downward arc then, that we sometimes find ourselves on, we maybe because we have forgotten. We have forgotten to get off track, to veer into the spiritual center of our being, to to really connect with it. We've allowed the circumstances, the darkness, the conditions to have power over us. And we just get simply wrapped up into it, and we forget that there is a higher power, and there is within us this divine intelligence is within us. So a blessing of the downward arc then, being in that place, is that it is a messenger. It's a messenger for each one of us. It lets us know that we're not in alignment. We're not in alignment. And once you realize that we're not in alignment with the light of God, with spirit, with divine intelligence, with whatever you want to call this magnificent energy that has created us, then it's a message for us to get right back on track again. Get right back. Something's not right. Something doesn't feel right. I'm disconnected. So go within. Go within, because all the answers we ever need are within ourselves. We hear this all the time, but it's really the truth. Listen to what that divinity within you is saying. So the next part of that is chemicalization. If you remember, I did talk about that once before, and Emma Curtis Hopkins wrote a whole chapter on that in one of her books. So there is another thing that might be going on for you when you find yourself in this downward arc of the circle, and it also is a great blessing. And I'll describe a scenario, and you can see if it feels familiar to you. So you have an awakening, right? You find out all about New Thought, and you're beginning to look at life differently. Everything looks brighter, looks clearer. It's like you really have found the way. You woke up. You're on your path right now. You've begun a whole new relationship with God, with divinity, with your divine self. And perhaps you started coming to the spiritual center or another spiritual center, or perhaps you took some classes and really, because we really wake up in those classes, really expand. And so now you're on this whole wonderful cycle of feeling great. Everything is fantastic. Or perhaps, even if you're not new to spirituality, you took one of our core classes and deepened even more. And so now life is really glowing and looking fabulous and great. But then all of a sudden, it stops. Now it really more than stops. It seems sometimes to go in reverse. You've done all this work, all this studying, you've come Sunday services, you've been uplifted, and then all of a sudden everything goes into a tailspin. Ever happened to anyone? Maybe not. Just me. That's why I'm up here, so I can remember. So you become frightened, though, and discouraged in that time. Because, you know, you were so in alignment with this awakening within you, and so then you start doubting that anything really happened. Nothing really took place. I'm back to the same old stuff again. Well, I have such a great reading about that. But before I go into that, this is a story about Dr. Bill Hornaday, who in religious science, this is a religious science spiritual center, he was Ernest Holmes, who was the founder, his protege. Okay? So he was working, doing a session. He was a practitioner. So he's doing a session because the practitioners do healing counseling. But he was doing it with a New York cab driver, Julius Pothards. And this Julius had the worst case of negativity he had ever encountered. And thanks to a lot of this counseling by Hornaday and Julius's willingness to be open to what was coming through, he started turning the negatives into positives in his life, which is what we teach. Live an empowered, positive life. That's what we teach. And things seemed to slow down for him, and things got better and better, and his whole attitude, it started to change. So, skip to the end of the story. So Julius and his wife went to a Sunday service where Bill Hornaday was presiding over it, and she was thanking, tears coming down her eyes, thanking Bill Hornaday for all that he had done for her husband. She said a miracle had taken place, And he said to her, he gave her a word of warning, because sometimes, even after what feels miraculous, things seem to slow down and it gets difficult all over again. This is all leading into what chemicalization is. So you might ask, what's up with that? I did all this work, I did all this reading, I'm meditating every day, I'm doing all my spiritual practices. What's up with that? Why is this going on in my life? For what? That's the wrong question. Always, what is this going on? What is happening, so that I can learn from it? Because there's always a blessing. Well, in religious science, we don't have the name chemicalization, but in Unity, the Fillmores, who trained with Emma Curtis Hopkins, she was their teacher, they have a word, and it's chemicalization, they call it. So it is a natural part, it's really good, of the process of expansion and growth in consciousness that we all go through as we deepen into these spiritual truths. So what is chemicalization? It's the chemical change that really takes place literally within us, within our thoughts and our feelings, which is then reflected into our body and into all of our activities, all of our experiences, everything that we go through in life. Catherine Ponder really defined it in her book, The Dynamic Law of Healing, where she writes, when people have lived for years, most of us have, in wrong thoughts, they have molded these negative notions into their bodies and affairs. Now they have begun to do an about-face, so about-face, thinking in terms of love, praise, forgiveness, release. Such reverse thoughts are a big dose, she writes, for their systems to take. You know, for 30, 40, 50, whatever it is years, you've been thinking one way, and now we have a whole different way of approaching life, and it's so much more positive. You know, we expect to just zoom right into it. Well, this is chemicalization. So, such reverse thoughts are a big dose. It's a new thought coming in for the system to take, she writes. So there is a clash between the old and the new way of thinking. And that sets up, and it really does, it sets up a chemical reaction in the mind, body, and affairs, and the experiences of the person. At such time, the good thing to remember is that, this is really powerful, the good thing to remember, she writes, is that one positive thought is more powerful than 1,000 rowdy negative thoughts. One positive thought, that's when the light casts out the dark. That's because it's more powerful. Darkness has no power. Okay, let me get back to it. She says, no matter how much noise it makes in the process, the old believing, it has to go. But having been in control for so long, our old way of thinking, it doesn't give up without a fight. Even while it is flaring up for the last time, you can know that it is actually unconditional, surrendering, and will soon be completely gone. So the old part within us that has been functioning a certain way for so long, all of a sudden we have this new way of thinking coming into our thought system, and it feels great. But you got to remember, we got the subconscious, this functioning with all those old hidden beliefs that maybe no longer serve. So they're going to come up. So there will be turmoil. I know people in a lot of our classes, Carol teaches classes, a lot of these classes, everything's going great, and then they would have these horrendous things take place because all of the old beliefs are coming up to be released, to be let go. So we have this whole new way of thinking that is serving our highest good, so we can enjoy life. Don't you want to enjoy life?
Yes.
Life?
Yes.
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 Freedom and joy, that is the purpose of us being here, really and truly. But now we have to relearn it. Like I say, babies know it when they're coming in. But we have to relearn it now, and that's fine because we're here. We're here to relearn it because a lot of people are still just functioning in the sleep. So they're just staying in those old beliefs that maybe are not serving them. So a chemicalization takes place because you're letting go of the old and the new is coming in. So it would seem that when you're in the downward arc of the circle of life, it's the natural and necessary to have a very positive experience as you're letting go of the old, and this is a process of what we're saying, chemicalization is called, because it is a chemical being released within our body. So we release that, and it comes, you'll find as you do more and more of this work, it becomes easier, and it becomes joyful to then move into these different situations that you are creating with your thinking. So, the next part of the talk is, it came to pass. This is the second perspective of what we're moving into. So it's important to remember that whatever is going on in your life, right here, right now, whether you have an opportunity to find the true light, or whether you are in the process of chemicalization, that this came to pass. This came to pass. How many times have we heard that in the Bible? And this came to pass. And this came to pass, right? It's a phrase that we hear an awful lot. Or as a minister, I read this one time, as a wonderful minister, Dr. Dominic Prolifero said, he's of the Hollywood Spiritual Center of Religious Science, when you're going through hell, don't stop and build a condo. And that's all about, really, don't hang out in it. You know, we go through these situations, and it's like, we're in the story. And we ain't going to let go of that story. We're going to stay in that story, damn it, we're going to stay in that story. Because our ego is up in arms. But that's when transformation takes place. When we move through the fear, move through the story, to the blessing, because there's always a blessing. But you got the ego, you got to, you know, kind of transform it and be nice and gentle, but move through and know that this too shall pass, because it always does. It's one of my favorite affirmations, because it really is a phenomenal, it is. If you find yourself in that downward arc of the circle, this too shall pass, this too shall pass. And what great counsel this is for putting the downward arc of our lives in perspective, putting it in perspective so we're not stuck in it. Perhaps taking the attitude of, I have another story, of a carpenter. And this is told in a story in Neil Donald Walsh's book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. And it was called The Trouble Tree. And the story goes like this. The carpenter was hired to help restore an old farmhouse. And he just finished a rough first day on the job, a flat tire, and that really made him lose an hour's worth of work. He probably had days like this where it feels like everything's going wrong. The electric saw quit, and now his ancient truck, pickup truck, it broke, it fell apart, so he couldn't drive it. And the person telling the story says, when I drove him home, he sat in stony silence. On arriving, he invited me into his home. But as he walked by the front door, he touched the tips of this tree that was outside the door, and with both hands, and then he entered into the house. And it was like an amazing transformation took place. His tanned face was now a big smile on it, and he hugged his 2 children and his wife. Afterwards, he walked me back to the car, and as we passed the tree, my curiosity got the better of me, he said. I asked him, what did you do earlier? What were you doing? And he said, oh, that's my trouble tree. I know I can't help having troubles on my job sometime and in life, but one thing is for sure, I don't want to bring these troubles into my home where my wife and my children are. I want to leave them at the door, so I just hang them on this tree. And every morning I pick them up again when I walk past. Funny thing is, he said, when I come out in the morning, those troubles don't seem as heavy or as many as they were the night before when I hung them up. So maybe we all need a little tree, a little trouble tree. Hang our troubles on, go inside and just relax in the light of, and then to come out and see they're really, this too shall pass, and usually it's not as horrific as we make it. We make things even much more, oh my God, with the stories, so much more than they really are. We really do. Well, I do, I can speak for myself. I do, but then I get over it much quicker because I've been through chemicalization. I'm finished with it, for now anyway. This too shall pass. That's the name of the talk, because truly everything, when you feel like it's not, you're in that dark night of the soul. This too shall pass. If you just keep remembering that, it will pass faster for you. We block our flow by thinking our dark moments have come to stay. We begin our movement in the circle of life again by realizing that they came to pass. They did not come to stay. They don't stay. This too shall pass. It always does. So all experiences and circumstances, even when they feel like they're never going to end, will end. Will, because circumstances and experiences and feeling hurt and feeling bad will always pass. But within us is that infinite divine light. That's our eternal self that we speak of. There's no death in God. We don't believe in a God that dies. We believe in eternality. So within us is this eternal light. And that's what we can, when we're in those dark moments, know that there is a light of good that's within each and every one of you. And it never goes away. It's unchangeable. It's permanent. And will guide you and give you all the intuitive messages to be on that path where you are going to absolutely have an empowered, positive, loving life. Absolutely peaceful, too. So, if you find yourself on that downward spiral, the downward arc of the circle then, remember who you are. You are more than you are right now. And you can take your place on the circle of life. We all have a place on the circle of life, in case you didn't realize that. You're part of everything. You're not left out of anything. So Ernest Holmes wrote, to finish this off, we may meet difficulties, uncertainties, and doubts, barriers walling our passage, but we must not be discouraged when so confronted. We must climb over the rocks of unbelief, pass around the barriers of doubt, and plunge into the stream with faith. The stream will ever widen, the barriers will gradually disappear, and though we walk through the plains and the valleys of indecision and doubt, the streams will still carry us back to the ocean of our being. Ocean of our being. We can never be separated from who we truly are. So if you feel that you're on this downward arc of the circle, know that this too shall pass. And remember that there is a blessing always in every situation you find yourself in. Just stay open to it. You might not feel it, might not feel like a blessing, but know that there is good taking place for you. And every experience is a blessing. It truly is. And so it is.
So now.